Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt a quiet unease, like their words were kind, but something in their presence drained your peace? Some people don't raise their voice, but they drain your spirit. They smile, but their silence sharpens behind your back. And the worst part? It's not always obvious until it's too late. Not every enemy declares themselves. Some walk beside you, some laugh at your jokes, some even pretend to care. But deep down, their intention isn't connection, it's corrosion. Stoic wisdom teaches us not to fear such people, but to see them clearly. Not to hate them, but to rise above the games they play. You don't need to argue, prove, or retaliate. What you need is clarity, self-command, and a heart too rooted to be shaken. The world will not always be kind. People will not always be true. But your response, your discipline, your detachment, your dignity is still yours to master. So, if you've been hurt by false friends or confused by quiet betrayal, stay with me. There's strength in learning how to stand firm without hardening. There's power in learning how to see clearly without losing yourself. 1. Stand tall. When evil tests you, have you ever felt the sting of betrayal not from strangers, but from those you once trusted? People who smiled to your face but tore at your name the moment you turned away. They don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper in corners, plant quiet doubts, and wait patiently for you to fall, hoping to be the first to say, "I saw it coming." It doesn't take long in life to realize that not everyone who claps for you wants you to win, and not every opponent announces themselves. Some wear your friendship like a disguise. When evil rises against you, your first instinct might be to defend, to correct the story, to fight fire with fire. But the Stoics taught us that our true strength is revealed not in reaction, but in restraint. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. It's not weakness to stay still, it's power under full control, because those who try to provoke you aren't looking for justice. They're looking for your spirit. They want you angry, they want you off balance, because the moment you fight like them, they win." There was a man I once knew, quiet, measured, respected in his field. He didn't chase credit, but his work spoke for itself. When a new manager arrived, one threatened by his calm confidence, subtle sabotage began. Rumors, strategic exclusions, undermining in meetings. The man said nothing. He continued to work, not with bitterness, but with quiet precision. Over time, it became obvious who was causing the division. The manager was eventually replaced, but the man never had to raise his voice. His consistency was louder than any accusation. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Not silence for the sake of avoidance, but silence as a form of sovereignty. You're not here to play in the mud with people who enjoy filth. You're here to walk a higher path. When someone lies about you, your reputation is not lost. It is simply tested. When they gossip, they reveal more about themselves than about you. Let them. Don't try to control the narrative. Master yourself instead. Epictetus reminds us, "If evil be spoken of you, and it be true, correct yourself. If it be a lie, laugh at it." The Stoic does not bend to every rumor. They do not tremble at every insult, because they know this. If your foundation is firm, no wind can shake you. Let people twist your words. Let them misinterpret your kindness. The truth doesn't need defense when your life becomes its own evidence. And here's the irony. Evil people don't attack you because you're weak. They target you because something about you stands tall. It may be your discipline, your peace, your refusal to join their game. They don't want to defeat you. They want to pull you into a version of yourself that betrays your own values. Don't give them that. Stay alert. Stay grounded. Let their noise pass like wind against stone. When you remain unmoved, they lose interest, because they never wanted the truth. They only wanted a reaction. Remember, every time you choose not to respond with venom, you take back your power. Every time you walk away with your peace intact, you rise without lifting a single weapon. The Stoic way is not passive, it's active, inner strength. It's not about letting others win, it's about refusing to lose yourself in the process. The battle, after all, isn't always out there. The real one is within, and if you can win that, no enemy can truly defeat you. Now, let's go deeper. What happens when those silent attacks come from the very people you once thought were in your corner? 2. Clarity is your greatest protection. Have you ever wondered why certain people, those you've helped, supported, even protected, are the first to turn their backs on you? Why the ones who benefited most from your kindness become the loudest voices of slander when you no longer bend to their expectations? It's a painful discovery, but one every strong soul eventually encounters. The Stoics understood this deeply. Life, they taught, doesn't test your peace in moments of quiet. It tests it in storms stirred by others. And sometimes those storms come wearing familiar faces. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That's not to blame you for others' behavior. It's to remind you of your responsibility not to hand them your power." When you are met with lies, with mockery, with betrayal, your first and greatest task is not to fight back, but to remain whole. The insult is not your downfall unless you accept it as truth. The betrayal is not your collapse unless you build your identity on their approval. I remember a man I once met, quiet, consistent, never flashy. He built something meaningful in his work, always helping others succeed. But the moment he was promoted, whispers began. Accusations, false claims, quiet, cold shoulders. Not because he had done wrong, but because he had grown beyond what others could control. He could have defended himself in anger. Instead, he let his actions speak. Months passed. Those who tried to break him only exposed their own intentions, and he, without a word of retaliation, kept rising. There's something powerful in that kind of restraint. When others throw stones, the Stoic doesn't collect them to build a wall of vengeance. They build a foundation of clarity. When they twist your words, your integrity becomes your silence. When they question your motives, your consistent character becomes your shield. The more they try to drag you into emotional chaos, the more disciplined your stillness must become. Understand this: people are not drawn to harm you because you are weak. They are drawn because something in you threatens the illusion they live in. You're not easily controlled. You don't depend on their approval. You don't play into their emotional games. And that unsettles those who cannot find peace within themselves. They attack not because you are wrong, but because you represent a kind of freedom they do not possess. So the next time someone misjudges you, slanders you, or tries to make you question your worth, pause. Don't react. Observe. Ask yourself, am I responding to preserve my peace or to prove a point? Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need validation. It only needs to endure. As Seneca reminds us, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials. Let them speak. Let them distort. Let them try to shrink what they cannot understand. You remain tall, not in arrogance, but in quiet conviction. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to live with integrity, even when no one claps for it. And now, as we move forward, let's examine what truly happens when evil hides behind those we once trusted most. 3. Let pain refine you, not define you. What if everything they did to break you only sharpened the edge of who you're becoming? What if the betrayal wasn't a setback, but a shaping? We often think pain is where we lose ourselves, but the Stoics taught the opposite. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." You don't become strong by avoiding hardship. You become strong by refusing to be consumed by it. And that's what evil people don't understand. They think that lies, rejection, and manipulation can tear your spirit apart, but all they've done is carve away what you no longer need. Every insult they whispered, every trap they set, every time they turned people against you, it wasn't your loss. It was your release. You didn't lose reputation. You lost illusions. You didn't lose relationships. You lost the weight that couldn't go with you where you're heading. You don't carry anger now. You carry insight. You don't seek revenge. You've outgrown the need for it. There was a man who was wrongfully accused in his workplace. People he helped, mentored, even defended, turned against him. At first, he wanted to fight, to shout his truth, but instead he chose silence. He kept doing his work. He refused to gossip. And over time, truth surfaced, not because he forced it, but because he outlasted the lie. His silence didn't mean surrender. It meant he had nothing to prove. That's the power you carry. You don't need to argue to validate your peace. You don't need to expose them to restore your worth. When you stop feeding the fire, it dies on its own. What they meant to burn you with becomes the very fire that refines you. Evil tried to pull you into chaos, but you walked through it, collected. They thought they buried you. You were taking root. Let them underestimate you. Let them call your restraint weakness. The Stoics called it inner mastery. The ability to remain unmoved in the presence of chaos. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Not everyone will see your growth. They're not meant to, but you will, and that's enough. So let the pain do its work. Let it teach, not torment. Let it shape, not define. What you've gone through wasn't for nothing. It was preparation. And the more you walk forward without needing to retaliate, the more untouchable you become. Because true strength isn't loud, it's steady. And your steadiness is what evil fears most. You've learned to turn pain into wisdom, betrayal into boundaries, and loss into clarity. That's how you win, not by proving them wrong, but by proving yourself unshakable. 4. Restraint speaks louder than retaliation. Have you ever sat in silence, wondering if the pain someone caused you had any meaning? The slander, the betrayal, the cold isolation that left you questioning everything, was it just cruelty, or was it preparation? There's a moment often quiet and unexpected when it all begins to make sense. When you realize the chaos wasn't punishment, it was refinement. The Stoics taught that adversity is not the enemy, it's the tutor. Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. That doesn't make the wounds less painful, but it does remind us they're not pointless. They're part of your shaping. You were not being destroyed. You were being defined. I remember a story of a craftsman who forged blades by hand. He heated, hammered, and cooled each piece again and again, not out of cruelty, but because the fire and friction were necessary to strengthen the metal. When asked why he didn't avoid the hardest blows, he replied, "A blade that has not been tested cannot be trusted. The same is true for you. The people who tried to break you were not forging your downfall, they were shaping your endurance. And your silence, in moments when it would have been easier to scream, was not weakness. It was strength under control. That silence was you refusing to descend to their level. That composure was your invisible weapon. People may one day ask you how you stayed calm while your name was being dragged, how you kept walking when others wanted to see you fall, and your answer won't be rage or revenge. It will be presence, inner clarity, the kind of quiet power that comes from knowing you don't need to match darkness to defeat it. Evil people thrive on reaction. They gain ground when they drag you into emotional chaos. But the moment you stop responding, they lose control. You win not by overpowering them, but by refusing to become them. The Stoic doesn't protect their peace by running from conflict. They protect it by not feeding conflict with their energy. Epictetus said, "Who is your master? He who has power over any of the things on which you have set your heart." If someone can rob you of peace with a whisper or a rumor, they own you. But if you remain still, grounded, deliberate, you've reclaimed your autonomy. Their chaos stays with them. It does not enter you. There will always be people who choose bitterness over growth, drama over dignity. They will try to pull you into arguments that don't deserve your breath, into roles you've already outgrown. Don't follow. They will bait you with insults, test your restraint, mock your calm. Don't bite. Your assignment is not to change them, it's to stay clear of the energy that built them. You weren't made to match their fire. You were made to walk untouched through it. In one case I witnessed, a teacher was wrongfully accused by a peer. She had every opportunity to go public, to retaliate, but instead she stepped back. She focused on her students. She taught with excellence, consistency, and care. A year later, her accuser was quietly removed. She was offered leadership, not because she fought back, but because she stayed focused. When you protect your peace, life notices, people notice, and most importantly, you notice who you are becoming. Not every battle deserves your presence. Some are won by simply walking away. The Stoic way is not to be indifferent, it is to be wisely selective. Preserve your time, your energy, your mind. Evil people aren't always individuals. Sometimes they are patterns, assignments, energies designed to wear you down and blur your purpose. But if you recognize the test, you reclaim the power. And that's when you begin to grow, not just past the pain, but into the person the pain was preparing you to be. So if you're in the middle of this kind of storm, pause and remind yourself, not everything thrown at you deserves to be caught. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them stay stuck in cycles while you rise in clarity. Because your peace is not passivity, it's precision. And if you've ever handled evil without losing yourself, comment the word clarity below. That one word says more than 1,000 arguments ever could. And if this message is speaking to you, subscribe now, quietly, intentionally, because we're not done. In the next part, we'll talk about what to do when the enemy is not just whispering from the outside, but echoing from the people closest to you. 5. Fire doesn't destroy, it reveals. Have you ever reached a moment where everything around you felt like it was collapsing, and yet something inside you refused to give in? Where you stood in the middle of betrayal, loss, and false accusation, and somehow, without knowing how, you kept moving forward. It's in those moments that your real strength begins to emerge. Not when life is soft and applause is loud, but when the room goes silent and all you have left is your breath and your will. The Stoics taught that suffering is not the enemy of progress, it's the fire that shapes it. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." You don't become unshakable by being untouched. You become unshakable by refusing to be moved. Pain gives you discernment. Betrayal sharpens your boundaries. Lies teach you what truth feels like. When evil rises against you, it's not a sign that you've done something wrong. Often, it's proof that you carry something within you that cannot be manipulated and that unsettles those who feed on control. You didn't lose when they turned their back. You didn't lose when your name was slandered. You only lost the weight that was never meant to come with you into the next season. There was a young artist who built everything with honesty. She welcomed others, shared her work freely, helped even those who competed with her. But when her light started to gain attention, the sabotage came. Friends became critics. Collaborators became competitors. Projects were stolen. Her instinct was to quit, to disappear. But she chose instead to remain still. She poured her pain into her next piece of work. And that piece, the one born out of the storm, was what made her name. When asked how she overcame the betrayal, she said, "I didn't fight them. I fought to keep myself intact." That is stoicism in motion. The refusal to let other people's chaos determine your direction. Evil loses not when it attacks, but when you rise anyway, when you cry, but still stand, when you feel broken, but remain unbent. That kind of quiet endurance is terrifying to those who feed on disorder. Evil thrives on reaction. It grows when you scream. It crumbles when you go silent and steady. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action." That means the very thing designed to destroy you becomes the thing that carries you forward, if you allow it. Some doors only open through fire. Some levels of clarity only come through pressure. What feels like darkness isn't always the absence of light, it's the moment before your next becoming. And yes, there are seasons where the storm isn't just around you, it enters you. The anxiety creeps in, the betrayal cuts deeper than expected. Even your own thoughts become enemies. You begin to wonder if anyone sees, if any of it matters. And it's in that exact moment that you're given a choice. Will you define yourself by what was done to you or by how you choose to rise from it? This is not about denying pain. Cry if you must. Grieve if you need. But don't let their actions become your identity. The Stoic doesn't claim to feel nothing. They train themselves not to be ruled by what they feel. When evil comes, it's not always dressed in fury. Sometimes it comes in charm, in compliments, in those who once held your trust. But their betrayal is not your breaking, it's your turning point. A chance to live unshaken, not because life is fair, but because your peace is no longer up for negotiation. Every attack you've endured is not wasted. It becomes part of the foundation you stand on now. Every insult swallowed without retaliation becomes a brick in the fortress of your integrity. Every time you chose composure over chaos, you were not being passive, you were mastering your mind. So, if you find yourself surrounded by bitterness, by drama, by confusion, pause. Don't match their energy, don't feed their fire. Transform it. Let them wonder how you made it through. Let them ask how you stayed so calm. And let your life, not your words, be the answer. Now let's move forward. Because sometimes the hardest evil to face is not the one in public, but the one that enters your own inner world. 6. Silence is your strongest reply. There are nights when the world is quiet, but your mind is not. Nights when you lie awake, replaying what they said, what they did, how they looked you in the eyes and smiled while holding the knife behind their back. You think of the silence they gave when you needed support, the betrayal that arrived when you expected loyalty, and in that stillness, evil finds its voice. It whispers not through words, but through doubt. You weren't enough. You should have fought harder. You are alone. But let me ask you, what if that silence wasn't abandonment? What if it was an invitation to build something stronger inside you? The Stoics believed that solitude was not punishment, but preparation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. In isolation, you are not being forgotten. You are being shaped. You are not being punished. You are being refined." And those who wronged you, those who wore masks to the world, only revealed what you were never meant to become. Their cruelty became a mirror, showing you the power of restraint, the depth of your resilience, and the clarity of your own values. I knew a man who was exiled from his own circle, false rumors, quiet slander, doors closed without explanation. For a long time he obsessed over what was said, what he could have done differently, but one day, walking alone along the edge of a riverbank, he stopped replaying the story. He realized the people who turned against him had never truly stood with him. They feared the calm he carried. They couldn't manipulate it, so they tried to stain it. But his silence, his refusal to return insult for insult, became the proof of everything they lacked, and over time they faded from relevance, while he stood more rooted than ever before. This is the core of Stoic power, refusing to be defined by others, even when their voices are louder. Evil thrives on chaos, on reaction, on pulling you into the storm. It wants your energy. It wants your anger, but it cannot touch you if you remain still. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself, and when you master your response, you become untouchable." You don't need revenge to reclaim your worth. You don't need public vindication to prove your integrity. What you need is to live so rooted in peace that even betrayal cannot pull you off course. Evil people may still exist. They will still try, but they are no longer fighting the same version of you. You're not loud, but you're not weak. You've learned the art of enduring without explaining, of walking away without bitterness, of standing tall without needing the world to applaud. They will wonder how you keep smiling without striking back, how you speak without venom, how you forgive without apology. And the answer is simple: because you've already won, you've already broken the cycle. You no longer scream to be seen, you see yourself. You no longer fight to be heard, you hear your own clarity. Let them think they've fooled others. Let them walk freely with their masks. You are not here to expose them. You are here to complete something greater than their schemes can touch. And while they remain entangled in fear, control, and manipulation, you have stepped into something freer. You no longer live to prove. You live to embody. You are no longer reacting. You are responding. And that shift is everything. So when evil comes knocking again, and it will, remember, you've been here before, and this time you're not trembling. You're not chasing closure. You're not begging to be understood. You've learned that some victories don't look like battles won. They look like storms endured in silence. They look like peace kept when you had every reason to explode. They look like walking forward, not because the past is fixed, but because you are. And that is a power no enemy can reach. Now, let's turn to one final truth. What happens when your quiet strength becomes the very thing they fear most? 7. You're stronger. Because you didn't break, there's a kind of strength that doesn't show up when you're praised. It rises in silence after betrayal. It doesn't shout. It doesn't fight to be seen. It appears quietly after the dust settles when no one's watching, and you're left staring at the wreckage of trust you thought would last. Have you ever sat in that space when the people you believed in most became the ones who cut the deepest? It leaves more than wounds. It leaves questions. But eventually, through that very silence, something inside you shifts. The Stoics believed that suffering was not meant to destroy you, but to awaken you. Seneca said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." And the truth is, you were never meant to remain soft in places that required steel. The evil people who tried to ruin you didn't realize they were shaping something stronger than they ever imagined. Not bitterness, but clarity. Not revenge, but stillness. Not pride, but power, the kind that no applause can give and no betrayal can take away. There was once a woman who gave everything to a group she trusted. Time, energy, loyalty, until slowly, quietly, they began to shift. Conversations changed. Smiles turned forced. Lies began to ripple behind her back. And when it all collapsed, she didn't explode. She withdrew. Not from the world, but into herself. She studied. She healed. And by the time they realized what they lost, she was no longer reachable, not out of ego, but evolution. She had outgrown the room, and the silence they once weaponized became the shield she never needed to explain. This is how evil loses, not when it's confronted, but when it's ignored. Not when you react, but when you transform. Evil expects you to mirror it. It wants you loud, angry, scattered. But when you don't respond, when you stay centered, when you walk away instead of engaging, you become the one thing it can't control. That's when power rises, not from emotion, but from clarity. You don't need to prove anything to those who never saw you clearly. Their betrayal wasn't your loss. It was your refinement. You stopped needing closure because you stopped needing connection in places that dishonored your peace. And the people who once made you question your worth now serve only one function. They remind you of who you'll never become. Evil people don't always look like enemies. Sometimes they sit across from you at dinner. Sometimes they use your own love as a tool. But the Stoics never taught us to fear people. They taught us to master ourselves. Epictetus wrote, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That's why you no longer need to argue. You don't need to defend your heart to people who feed on conflict. You simply leave. Not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown their games. Now, you carry discernment. You recognize manipulation before it forms into words. You feel dishonesty before it lands in a sentence. You no longer see faces, you read intentions. And that is why you've become dangerous, not to people, but to illusions. You see through the mask now. You move with different instincts. You don't waste time in rooms where your presence must be explained. And every time you walk away with grace, you level up. You've learned that peace is a choice, not a prize, that endurance is stronger than exposure, and that the highest form of revenge is not in vengeance, but in becoming untouchable to the same wounds that once wrecked you. You are no longer shaken when people leave. You're no longer surprised when they switch, because now you understand they were not your stability. They were your sharpening stone. So yes, you've cried. Yes, you've broken. But now you rise, not with noise, not with validation, but with calm conviction. And in this new space, evil no longer alarms you. It activates you. Because you know, when evil enters the room, something greater is about to be born. And in that awareness, we arrive at the final truth, what it truly means to walk forward, not hardened, but awakened. 8. You are what survived. Have you ever looked back at everything meant to destroy you and realized it didn't? The betrayal, the silence, the whispers behind closed doors, they came like waves, intending to erode your strength. And yet, here you are, not just standing, but deeper, sharper, quieter in power than ever before. There is something remarkable about the strength born after devastation, not the kind that boasts or demands to be seen, but the kind that radiates without asking for attention. The Stoics called this fortitudo, the ability to endure without losing the self. You've been through seasons where no one clapped for your survival, where the smiles around you were masks, where the loyalty you offered was met with hidden daggers. But what you may not have realized is this: every act of betrayal became part of your refinement. You were not being shattered, you were being stripped of what was never solid to begin with. And in that exposure, you found something that couldn't be faked: self-possession, the quiet recognition that your value was never theirs to grant or take. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Evil people did not stop you. They revealed the path. When they slammed doors, they redirected your steps. When they lied, they sharpened your discernment. When they disappeared, they cleared the noise so you could finally hear yourself think. What felt like abandonment was, in truth, alignment. There's a story of a sculptor who was given a ruined piece of marble, cracked, uneven, dismissed by others as worthless. But he took it anyway. With every strike of his chisel, he removed what didn't belong. People mocked the process. They couldn't see what he saw. But when it was finished, the statue stood taller and more graceful than anything created before. That's you. They saw a person breaking. You were being carved. Now you walk with a presence they can't imitate. A voice steady, not loud. A calm that unsettles those who can't understand how you've survived so much and still hold peace like a sword. And that's what makes you powerful. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You don't even need them to understand. Because you've seen what pretending costs. You've felt what real resilience requires. Let them keep talking. Let them wonder. You don't have to prove anything. The victory isn't in being noticed. It's in knowing you've already won by not becoming like them. Every step you take now is no longer reactive. It's deliberate. You've stopped chasing closure. You've stopped seeking justice in the hands of those incapable of it. Because you've learned that walking away in silence is sometimes the greatest act of strength. And when evil sees you now, it knows it failed. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're not even wounded. You're simply beyond their reach. Because what you've become wasn't built by applause or broken by betrayal. It was forged in stillness, and that stillness now moves you toward a life they were never meant to walk with you. So from this point on, you don't walk forward to prove anything. You walk forward because you've already become what they could never break. And that, in the end, is the quiet victory evil never saw coming. If you're still standing after everything that tried to silence you, that means your strength is not a theory, it's a truth. You didn't just endure the chaos, you walked through it with your dignity intact. You don't need to fight for revenge or prove your worth to those who once doubted you. Let their noise fade, let their presence dissolve, because what's rising within you is far more powerful than anything they tried to break. You've grown, you've changed. And now you move with quiet clarity. What once triggered you no longer disturbs your peace. That's not weakness, that's mastery. If this message resonates with your journey, consider subscribing to stay anchored on this path. And in the comments, type "Still I rise" if you've learned to stay grounded even while surrounded by storms. This is not the end of your strength. In the next video, we'll explore how to defend your peace without ever lifting your voice. Until then, hold your calm close. You are walking proof that power doesn't always need to shout.